Hello. I'm going to have a serious conversation about freedom of speech. But before I do, I got to, quite literally, turn my fan on. So, yeah! Excuse me. Anyway, I have a funny looking light thing switch. It's a little complicated there. I don't really know how to explain it. But anyway, I am going to be talking about freedom of speech. And I know, kind of ironic coming from a guy who has his comment sections off. But this is a very serious video and a very serious topic, so I am going to do it. But before I talk about any of this, what do I mean by freedom of speech? Well, freedom of speech, and at least on my basic definition, basically means speaking in whatever language you prefer, speaking or talking, regardless of dialect or accent, and regardless of language, dialect, or accent, and be able to say simple or complicated thoughts, ideas, or beliefs, or such things as like certain topics or subjects, things like that. Just being able what you want to say and being able how you want to say it, things like that. That's basic freedom of speech. Well, what I'm going to be talking about is full freedom of speech. And there is an extreme to it, and I am, for all freedom of speech. I am a pro freedom of speech guy, and I like to have my comments off this video because I'm just that kind of guy, and I know for certain that I may or may not have a lot of anti-freedom of speech people. But the thing about freedom of speech is you can say you want anti-freedom of speech. You can say you want pro-freedom of speech. You might not even know what freedom of speech is. That's how big freedom of speech is. Because there are many complicated things to it. Like, for example, hate speech. Hate speech is one of those things where it's vague. And it's kind of what it sounds like, but not really. And, it's complicated. And also, things like that. But basically how I would define hate speech is basically when somebody says something you disagree with. That's what hate speech is. It's just something you don't like or you don't you disagree with. Like somebody said something in a certain way, or somebody said these words, or somebody spoke this language. That kind of thing. But it doesn't just apply to hate speech. It can also apply to good speech, being sorry about things, being kind about things, being right about things, being wrong about things, too. But let's go back to hate speech. I live in a country where it is viewed that hate speech is freedom of speech, which it is. Because the thing about freedom of speech, if it wasn't for things like hate speech being allowed at some point, the country that you live in, even if they have hate speech laws in place, if it wasn't for things that completely contradict or are completely, goes against those laws, if it wasn't for people who said things that are viewed as hate speech, there wouldn't be their country. There wouldn't be their nation. Somebody had to say something very, what you would consider wrong to make them want to be a part of that nation. But the thing is nobody should be going around and being like, oh, we should arrest you because you said our apples are good, or our apples are bad, for example. Like, you have an apple factory and things like that. And for whatever reason, people like the apples. And so you're gonna arrest him because that's bad or something. That's basically what hate speech is. It's basically taking something from thin air and turning it into an issue. Okay? Because the thing about hate speech, even, like, it's still technically an issue in America, but in a place like Canada, they have hate speech laws, and hate speech is a big problem over there, simply because they have laws in place that, well, don't protect hate speech, but are anti-hate speech. And the whole thing about having, like, being able to have those kind of conversations online and in real life is, it basically teaches you that you cannot control language. You cannot control how a person speaks, what words they say and how they say them, and what language they use. Things like that, and how they communicate. What do they do? Do they speak it? Do they use hand signs? Do they speak and both use hand signs? Do they use a certain type of code? Do they use certain type of colors? Do they do things in a specific way? Is it written down? Stuff like that. And basically, a lot of hate speech is basically just made to either, one, prevent criticism of their government, which they definitely don't like since they're a government. Two, it was probably made to protect certain groups, but now they'll most likely look at those groups with more prejudice because of those laws, and you might not even realize it. And three, they're probably just doing it so that way they have an excuse to just, like, call the police for when somebody says something they don't like. Especially if you live in a place like Australia or the UK or whatever, or Germany, because they're still trying to heal off from when East and West Germany, like, went into one nation, if you know what I mean. So, yeah. Hate speech. That's the big one when it comes to freedom of speech. And that's usually the thing that most people talk about, because it's so controversial. But the thing about hate speech is it changes all the time. And how you make that definition is constantly shifting. That's why whenever they make a hate speech law, it's always something that's super vague. They don't say anything that is direct or that can tell you what exactly they mean by whatever law it is specifically. Because, like the things I talked about earlier, it's meant to restrict speech on certain things for whatever reason. And basically they just want these type of laws, so that way whatever it shifts to, they can basically just give any excuse. I mean, there are exceptions. There are countries that have hate speech laws that are specific ways, but it's usually the exception and not the rule. Anyway, yeah, hate speech laws are bad. But then there are also, like, freedom of speech laws that are made for when you say compliments and stuff, or when you're being apologetic. For example, in Canada, you can get arrested for saying sorry to a certain extent. If you constantly say sorry all the time, you can probably get arrested for that. And then if you look at not the UK, the Germany, you could post a meme about, oh, how the German were like once Nazis or something, and then they'll go out and arrest you for it. You might go, well, that's kind of obvious, they have history for it. Yeah, but you would think, since there is an 80-year difference, at least time of recording, it's 2025, so there's, like, it's been 80 years since World War II has ended, and over 80 years or more, depending on whenever you're watching this. And they're still acting as if they just got out of the war, or they're just like a decade out of the war. You know, like it just happened a decade ago. Like, that's how they talk about it. Like, you can literally get arrested in a country like that just for, like, posting silly little memes being like, oh, I thought, like, this guy was funny, and he's funny, haha. You know, those kind of things. It's just, the thing is, it's stupid. Like, you shouldn't be getting arrested for complicated stuff, like criticizing their government or whatever, let alone just little itty bitty things, because why are you trying to limit speech so much? You don't need to, okay? Because the thing about limiting speech like this is basically it makes critical thinking go down, which is bad if you want your population to be smart on whatever you want them to be smart on. And two, it basically makes problems with speech worse. It doesn't change it. It either makes it stay the same or it makes it maybe go up a little bit, but it's for the long run, it's worse. For the long run. It might feel good and great in the moment, but having those still in place is not good. But if you had laws that are like, we view hate speech as freedom of speech, we view positive speech as freedom of speech, we view speech as speech of freedom of speech, you know, just to talk, make up complete weird things like, you know, I could come up to you and be like, nigger. Like, I can do that, you know? It would be nasty to you. It could be nasty to you. It could be really insulting to you. I know that if you heard that, you would probably felt really insulted, but I can do that and not be arrested for that. So I could go up to a police officer and say, like, oh, fuck you, police, you're ugly as shit. And he don't care because he's a police officer. They're used to it, okay? People like that are used to it. And when they're used to it, especially in a country where they, you know, have full freedom of speech, it causes a lot less problems, believe it or not, when it comes to regards and that. It can make them feel angry in the moment, but in the long run, you're not gonna get arrested for just saying something you could have easily forgotten about. Because the reason why people, like, in other countries tend to, especially like Canada or Australia, the UK or Germany or France or Spain or maybe even Russia or China, the reason why they hold on to grudges so much when it comes on to speech, and the reason why it's like they're so heavily a certain way when it comes to talking, is because they're limited on it. And because of that, they will cause problems because they can't express what they want to express for things they should have forgotten about 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. But now they're forced to remember it and regret it for the rest of their lives, when it could have just been a one-time thing they could have just forgot about, you know? Like, that's basically what's happening here. Now you could say, oh yeah, but there's bad things that happen in your country. Yeah, but hate speech is not one of them, really. Like, you could go, oh yeah, it's hate speech, but like I said in the prior to this video, hate speech means basically ways of talking or like speaking or using certain ways of talking as normal or not normal or whatever, and they don't like that. They view that as like, oh, you're spreading hate. I can spread hate without speaking language, buddy. I don't think you need laws for it. So it kind of makes it useless. It kind of just makes it look very unnecessary, which it is, you know? And that whole idea of hate speech laws just really shouldn't be a thing. It should really only be a thing you should read in history books. Like, oh, people used to have limited freedom of speech. People couldn't criticize what they wanted to criticize. People didn't have basic human rights. So unsurprising. That was from like thousands of years ago. How about change that into 1,000 years ago to about today? But even if that happens, it can still be 1,000 years ago in the future. But it would feel more significant. It would feel more, not just feel, but be more. No more. That you use your freedom of speech to spread actual truths, not just what they say is true or false. You can actually say false things too under freedom of speech. You can say whatever the hell you want in full freedom of speech in this country, in my home country. In fact, we've gotten more freedom of speech in recent years. So, and it's already full, so it's over full, I guess you could say, culturally speaking. Well, anyway, I gotta end this video. But yeah, it's freedom of speech. You should be able to read the way you want, write the way you want, think the way you want, be the way you want. Things like that. Or need, need or want all those things. Just figure it out and we'll get it done. And if hate speech laws are truly the best way, then may hell rain upon you. Anyway, have a nice day. And just remember, bye!